Two dead women, a box of chocolates, a cheating husband, and his chubby, jealous mistress 3,000 miles away. And it all started with a broken bicycle in Golden Gate Park. I know that it all sounds weird, but what we are talking about is a gift of chocolates laced with enough arsenic to kill a horse. This is the story of America's first murder by mail, a tale of a woman so scorned, so bitter, and so absolutely unhinged that she did the unthinkable with a box of candy. Forrest Gump tried to warn us. Too bad he wasn't around to tell Mary Elizabeth Dunning that life is like a box of chocolates. You're probably gonna die. Let's get into it. But first, if you like these scandals from yesteryear, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Picture it. August 9th, 1898, Dover, Delaware. The Pennington family was enjoying a peaceful evening on their sunlit porch when 14-year-old Harry Pennington brought in the mail. Among the letters was a beautifully wrapped package addressed to his aunt, Mary Elizabeth Dunning. Inside, a gorgeous box of chocolates with a simple note, "With love to yourself and baby, Mrs. C." Now, you might be thinking, who doesn't love getting chocolate in the mail? Mary Elizabeth certainly didn't suspect anything. She was, according to her husband, passionately fond of candy. So naturally, she did what any chocolate lover would do. She shared the wealth with her family right there on the porch. Mary Elizabeth took at least 3 pieces for herself. Her sister, Ida, enjoyed several as well, and most of the other family members nibbled on a piece or two. It was a perfect summer evening. Until it wasn't. 2 days later, Mary Elizabeth and Ida were dead. Dead. The other family members who had just eaten a bite or so became violently ill, but they survived. And those who hadn't touched the chocolates, they were perfectly fine. The math was simple and terrifying. Someone had sent Mary Elizabeth a box of poisoned candy through the U.S. mail. When the authorities tested the remaining chocolates, they found massive quantities of arsenic. Arsenic pieces as large as peas, according to the morning news. This wasn't accidental contamination. This was deliberate, calculated murder. The hunt for Mrs. C had now begun. But who was this mysterious Mrs. C? To understand that, we need to go back 3 years to 1895, Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, where John Preston Dunning, Mary Elizabeth's husband, was taking a bicycle ride. Now, John claimed his bike just happened to break down near a bench where a woman caught his eye. But considering what we know about his character, remember I told you that he was a cheating husband, this mechanical failure was no accident, but an opportunity. Now, just to show you how big of a cheater John was, get this. He was 32 years old when he encountered this woman who caused this mysterious mechanical failure. She was 41, overweight, and with just a little conversation, John also learned that she was married. Well, maybe her marriage at least gave them common ground from which to start a conversation, since he was married too. 2 married people, never the foundation for a stable romantic relationship. Nevertheless, he learned that her name was Cordelia Botkin. She was married to a man named Welcome A. Botkin, who sent her money on a regular basis. What a great catch Cordelia was, for a serial cheater like John anyway. She represented everything he was looking for, an available woman with her own income who wouldn't ask too many questions about his other activities. She couldn't judge him about being a married man because she was a married woman. Meanwhile, his wife, Elizabeth, was at home getting fed up with all of his cheating. She didn't know how many women there were. She certainly didn't know Cordelia by name. She just knew that she was fed up. And within a year of John's meeting Cordelia, his constant affairs had driven Mary Elizabeth back to Delaware with their daughter. Yes, they had a child together to top it all off. So when she'd had enough of his cheating, she decided to rear their child among family. Her family. And John was brokenhearted and learned his lesson, so he followed his wife back home to try his best to make things right with her and become a family man for their daughter's sake. Just kidding. He basically told his wife, "Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you," and moved into a house with Cordelia. Yep, John and Cordelia moved in together at 927 Geary Street in San Francisco, and it was their fantasy world. There, he would call her Ada, a cute pet name, or so she thought. It turned out that Ada was the name of another one of his former lovers, probably the best one he'd ever had, and he just didn't want to be calling out the wrong name at night when they were in the throes of passion. But consider how scandalous this is. It's 1895 and they were living openly as an unmarried couple, but neither of them seemed to care about social conventions or what anyone had to say. Now, you may have heard the saying, "A liar will cheat, and a cheater will steal." Well, this certainly applies to our Johnny boy, because John wasn't just a cheating husband. He was also a gambling addict and a thief. Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit more about John. I know that often when we think of cheaters who don't take care of their children, we think of jobless bums, whether they be men or women. But John had a darn good job working for the Associated Press as a foreign correspondent. And while he was working for the Associated Press, he was also a big-time gambler, and he lost often. Eventually, his gambling debts started piling up, and when he couldn't cover his losses, he embezzled $4,000 from his job to pay for his gambling debts. That's roughly $153,000 in today's money. The Associated Press discovered his theft and fired him immediately. So now, John was unemployed, in debt, and completely dependent on Cordelia financially. I guess now his attraction to her and her steady allowance makes more sense. Her husband, Welcome, was still sending her money, which meant that she was supporting John, but essentially it was her husband who was supporting John's broke ass. And how did John repay this generosity? By continuing to cheat on his mistress with other women. But we'll get to how she discovered that fact a little later. We still have a murder to solve. Now that Cordelia had John's wife out of the way, she realized that she had made the mistake that mistresses make when they become a cheater's main squeeze. She'd now left a vacancy for a new mistress, a new side woman, and she couldn't take it. Cordelia was getting increasingly possessive and jealous about John's other affairs. She wanted him all to herself and would get upset whenever he would so much as look at another woman. Isn't that ironic? I guess that now she might have had a clue about how his wife felt when John was running all over San Francisco with her. Meanwhile, Cordelia had launched her own campaign of psychological warfare against John's wife back in Delaware. She began sending Mary Elizabeth anonymous letters, taunting her about John's affairs and making sure she knew exactly what her husband was up to on the West Coast. What a miserable harlot. Like, don't bother the wife with that. You decided that you wanted to make this man your problem. His wife is minding her own business in Delaware, rearing their daughter by herself. And she's got to deal with these crazy letters. Can you imagine being Mary Elizabeth? You're trying to rear your child in peace, hoping your husband might actually eventually change, and suddenly you're getting anonymous letters detailing every sordid aspect of his extramarital activities from one of the people who was involved in said extramarital activities. The audacity of Cordelia. Fast forward to March of 1898. The Spanish-American War broke out and the Associated Press needed experienced foreign correspondents. And they must have needed them badly, because despite his previous embezzlement, they were desperate enough to rehire John to cover the conflict in Puerto Rico. This was John's chance to rebuild his career, but more importantly, it was his escape route from Cordelia, who was becoming increasingly demanding and now volatile. So of course John jumped at the chance to leave. You'd think that a guy who had such a great track record of lying would have just told Cordelia that he had to run to the store for some milk and never return. But instead, before leaving to cover the war, he told Cordelia that their affair was over. And to piss her off even more, he let her know that when his assignment ended, he planned to return to Delaware to give his marriage another try. Well, you know that this did not sit well with this jealous, disgusting, twisted broad. Cordelia had the nerve to be devastated, as if John were her husband. But I guess in her defense, she had sacrificed a lot for John. Her reputation, her marriage, her social standing. She'd supported him financially when he was broke and unemployable. She'd endured his other affairs and his gambling addiction, and now he was just leaving to go back to his wife like nothing had happened. And it's not like I feel sorry for her, I don't. She deserved that and worse, but I can understand her being a little angry. A little. But what she decided to do next was beyond unhinged. Beyond angry behavior. Yeah, the woman who had no right to be upset about a man returning to his wife after she had had an affair with him was not going down without a fight. Now, how crazy does that sound? John seems to have had his mind set on a reconciliation with his wife, but he had no idea that his last words to Cordelia would ultimately cost his wife her life. Yep, that's how far she was taking this. While John was in Puerto Rico, Cordelia was planning her revenge. First, she needed to do some shopping. Her first stop was 80 miles away from San Francisco, not exactly a convenient trip to make in 1898. Her destination was Stockton, California. There she went to a candy shop called The Wave, where she purchased a 1-pound box of bonbons. And bonbons are small, round chocolate candies that typically have a hard shell and a soft, creamy filling. That's an important detail. So is this. She asked the employees to give her a box of chocolates slightly underfilled. Now that's a strange request under any circumstance. When have you ever purchased specialty candy and asked the worker, "Please give me less than I'm paying for and don't fill out my container, thanks"? It was all the more strange because from Cordelia's appearance, she didn't look like the kind of woman to refuse an extra sweet treat. But the truth was, she needed room in that candy box for her special ingredients. So she got the candy that she needed and continued on her homicidal shopping spree. Next, she visited a drugstore called the Owl Drugstore. According to an 1898 edition of the San Francisco Call, Cordelia told the pharmacist, Frank Gray, that she needed arsenic to bleach a straw hat. Frank knew that arsenic wasn't the best product for bleaching hats and recommended oxalic acid and a chlorate of lime. A much better alternative for what she said she needed to do. But Cordelia insisted on the arsenic. She said that she already knew how to use arsenic, so that's what she wanted. Well, you know what they say. The customer's always right. Frank the pharmacist prepared 2 ounces of arsenic by pulverizing it and marking it as poison so that she would know to handle it with caution, and he sent her on her way. Now, at this time, Cordelia was staying at the Victoria Hotel. With her shopping out of the way, she went back to her room and got on with the next phase of her plan. She carefully opened the chocolate box and injected arsenic into multiple pieces of bonbons, then resealed everything to make it look untampered. You know where this story is going. And in case you're wondering why exactly Cordelia used candy to get to Mary Elizabeth, it was because she had been paying very close attention to John while she was his mistress. John had once told Cordelia that his wife was, quote, passionately fond of candy, so she knew that the chocolates were the perfect weapon. She also remembered the name of one of Mary Elizabeth's friends in San Francisco, Mrs. Cordelia. That's the name that she would use for this deadly delivery. She gathered up all the poisoned chocolates into a beautiful package and addressed the package to Mary Elizabeth Dunning in Dover, Delaware. and included that innocent-looking note. With love to yourself and baby, Mrs. C. This jealous Jezebel sent those chocolates to John's wife, hoping that she, Mary Elizabeth, and her daughter would eat the chocolates and die. It doesn't get any lower than that. And you know what happens after that. It didn't make news headlines because for Mary Elizabeth, it was just an ordinary day when her friend back in San Francisco surprised her with chocolates. She got her mail and was delighted to see the sweet surprise. "Come here, Ida. Children, come see. We got candy in the mail." It was the last thing that she would ever eat. Everyone who ate the chocolate was violently ill for the next few days. But Mary Elizabeth and Ida were only sick for 2 days, because before the third day came, they died. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why Mary Elizabeth didn't recognize the handwriting. That's something that was never explained in the research that I did. I don't understand it myself, but let's continue. When John received word of his wife's death while stationed at work, he immediately boarded a ship back to America. Once he learned that Mary Elizabeth had been intentionally poisoned, only one name came to his mind as someone who could do this to his wife, but he didn't want to believe that it would be her. No, he'd have to wait and see some evidence when he got home. John arrived to a throng of reporters waiting for him at the dock, shouting, "Who poisoned your wife?" as he made his way down the gangplank. Shortly after he got settled in Dover, Delaware State Police interviewed John and showed him what they had: the chocolate box and the note inside of it. Immediately, the handwriting on the note was unmistakable. It was the same hand that had written letters to John during his war assignment, and the string of anonymous threatening letters to his wife before that. John's suspicions were confirmed. He told the police that this was the handwriting of his lover. Delaware police contacted their San Francisco counterparts with one simple instruction: find Cordelia Botkin. And find her they did. But it wasn't quite as easy as they thought it would be. She was no longer living at the address where she shared a home with John. Oh no, they found Cordelia in Stockton. And guess who she was with? Her husband, Welcome. She had magically made up with him and was now apparently acting like nothing had happened. When police arrived to arrest her, she put up little fight. That's not the reaction that an innocent person would have to being arrested on not one, but 2 charges of murder. But during her arrest, Cordelia did have one audacious request. She insisted on packing an extraordinarily heavy trunk that required 2 officers to carry it out. And for some reason, the officers obliged. Cordelia Botkin's trial began on December 6, 1898, and became a media sensation. The prosecution's case was solid. Expert witnesses confirmed the handwriting on the chocolate box matched Cordelia's. Pharmacist Frank Gray testified about selling arsenic to a woman matching Cordelia's description, who insisted she needed it to bleach a hat. Candy shop employees from the Wave in Stockton remembered selling her a 1-pound box of chocolate, slightly underfilled at her request. And I have to share with you one of those letters that Cordelia wrote to Mrs. Dunning so that you can hear just how delusional and sick in the head this chick was. I'm quoting excerpts from one of the letters entered into evidence. Quote, "Mrs. Dunning, I sincerely hope you have made all due inquiry concerning the grave information I sent you out of the pure interest I have in you concerning the conduct of your husband. And if you have not, you are not the woman I always supposed you were, if you would renew former living with the man that so forgot you as he did, and placed you in the position he so premeditatively did." So you see, Cordelia is just concerned for John's wife and doesn't want her to waste her time on such a horrible guy. She went on to write, "He was constantly with this interesting and pretty woman who, by the way, is an English woman. Stop. This fool is talking about herself. Yeah, she's just so pretty. I'm only sure that in this particular letter that Cordelia was referring to herself because she also named the 927 Geary address as a place where Mrs. Dunning could go to confirm these quote-unquote facts for herself. Imagine Mary Elizabeth Dunning making a trip to that address and waiting around to see some pretty woman going in and out of the front door, only to find Cordelia. She would surely think that she misread the address. Then Cordelia went on to end her letter by writing, quote, "This is all for your sake. So kindly take it as intended. Your friend." That's it. She signs it, "Your friend." Well, excuse my Spanish, but what a puta. And puta is a bitch, so excuse my English also. But that's enough of her. But the most damaging testimony came from John Dunning himself. And make no mistake, he was on trial too. Not as a literal defendant, but he had to get on the stand and open up about this extramarital affair that he had been having with the woman who was now accused of killing his wife and sister-in-law. Let me share a little bit of that testimony with you as it was recorded straight from the court record and printed in the December 22nd edition of the San Francisco Call. This is Cordelia's defense attorney cross-examining John. The attorney says, "You speak of close intimacy. What do you mean by that expression?" John says, "I told you at length of the life led by myself and Mrs. Botkin. I tried to avoid speaking too plainly." The attorney says, "Well, what was its nature?" John says, "It was improper. Do you want further answer?" Attorney says, "I want an answer." John says, "My relations with Mrs. Botkin were such as a married man has no right to have with a married woman or any other woman. I have been with her and have remained overnight in her apartments." And now I'm just quoting the writing. The court here interposed an objection in the name of decency, and the questioning on that line ceased. The witness was asked as to a feeling of hostility he bore toward Mrs. Botkin. He said he had such a feeling, but it was not one looking toward vengeance. He came here as a witness to condone for the faults of his past life excess. And condone is in quotes, but I wonder if they think that he meant something else, like maybe atone? I don't know. Back to the attorney. He says, "Explain your hostility toward Mrs. Botkin." John says, "It arises because of the death of my wife." The attorney asks, "What was the first thing to cause you to think of Mrs. Botkin in connection with the poisoning of your wife?" John says, "Because of the relations that had existed previously between us, and of the feeling she had for me, or that I thought she had for me. In my own heart, I did not think anyone else would do it." End quote. Now, let me share this with you. We have already talked about when John found out that his wife died, but during this cross-examination, the court learned that John, the man who said that he was ending things with Cordelia and returning home to his wife after his assignment, yeah, that same John Dunning, literally the hour before he learned of Mary Elizabeth's death, he went to the post office to mail a letter to Cordelia, a letter that ends with, quote, "I hope everything has continued to be well with you. With my love, Jay." Now, does that sound like a man who's done with his fling to you? I'm not going to read the whole letter to you. I'll put it on the screen for you to see. Or better yet, I'll ask my editor, Jay, to put it on the screen for you to see right now. Jay is great. It would take me much longer to get these videos done without him. Show him some love in the comments, y'all. But there's something that I want to briefly discuss that speaks to John's extreme selfishness. So you remember that he was reporting on the Spanish-American War. Okay, so he writes, "We got the news today that peace had been declared. and I was supposed to be going to New York soon, but I know nothing particular about it. I will have to send you an address when I get to New York. So there's one thing. Clearly, he was not done with Cordelia. Why does your ex-mistress need your new address? But that's not even the point. He goes on to write, "This is the most beautiful island I have ever seen. And," he writes, "I am really sorry the war is over, for I have certainly enjoyed it, and I am in considerable uncertainty about the kind of work I will do when I go to New York." That's it. Like, dude, I'm so sorry that the ending of a literal war brought your little Puerto Rican vacation to a screeching halt. But over 2,000 American soldiers died in that war, mostly from diseases like typhoid and yellow fever. Still, over 300 died in combat. And there were over 55,000 Spanish casualties. But this guy was just concerned about his fun and his next job. Mary Elizabeth deserved so much better than this guy. Anyway, Cordelia's defense attorneys questioned him more about his history of infidelity. When asked how many women he'd been intimate with during his time in San Francisco besides Cordelia, John admitted, many. When pressed for specifics, he said there were, quote, "too many to remember." When pressed for names, he claimed he was, another quote, "too much of a gentleman to reveal names." Well, John, you're just a prince among men. The judge held him in contempt and sent his cheating ass to jail, where he remained for several days until the question was withdrawn. The trial went on for about another week after that. Then the day before New Year's Eve, on December 30th, 1898, after deliberating for just 4 hours, the jury returned their verdict: guilty. The San Francisco Call's New Year's Eve headline was big and bold: "Mrs. Cordelia Botkin is guilty of the cruel Delaware murders." Cordelia was sentenced to life imprisonment. This whole time, her sisters and their husbands had been watching the trial. But guess who did not attend? Her husband, Welcome. He was certainly better off without her. Cordelia had to take the walk of shame from the courthouse to her cell, and she was granted the courtesy of having her sisters and brothers-in-law accompany her to her new address at the Gray Bar Hotel. This is where the story should have ended, but we know that Cordelia was never short on audacity. She had the nerve to demand a retrial, and she was granted one. It took place in 1904, and thankfully, it returned the same verdict. Mrs. Botkin is once more found guilty with life sentence jury's decree. And that's from the San Francisco Chronicle, April 8th, 1904. Cordelia Botkin spent the rest of her life in prison. In 1908, she learned that John Dunning had died penniless and drunk in Philadelphia. The news sent her into a deep depression. On March 10th, 1910, she died in prison from what the official report called softening of the brain due to melancholia. Today, I think that we would call it depression. And I gotta say that she and John got what they deserved. She was 56 years old. So the moral of the story is, the next time your boyfriend cheats on you with his wife, let him go home. Maybe you're the one in the wrong. This video has been brought to you by Nacho Man. If he's Nacho Man, leave him alone. Bad things can happen. My sources for this story are on the screen. This video has been brought to you by me. Well, me and my new YouTube channel, Verified YouTube Guide. Are you just starting your YouTube journey and feeling overwhelmed? Don't worry, I've got you covered. My channel, Verified YouTube Guide, is your go-to resource for practical, step-by-step tips to grow and monetize your channel. It's literally follow-along video tutorials. I'm showing you the steps I took to get 180,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you don't know how to do something, you can just copy my work one step at a time. From setting up your channel to showing you how you can earn money at any stage on YouTube. And I'm not just talking about YouTube ad revenue. If you have something important to say or a service to sell, start talking about it on YouTube now. Don't wait. Subscribe to Verified YouTube Guide today, and let's build your channel together. You don't have to figure this out alone. The link is in the description box. I'll see you there. I hope that you have enjoyed this tale so far. If you love these scandalous stories from history that make Ty's Hot Mess History a time capsule for the culture, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Give this video a thumbs up. It's free and helps a ton. Whether you're watching or listening, thank you for letting me be a part of your day.